fall into order like it should.
Welcome to the National Indian Gaming Association's The New Normal webcast, What's Happening with Oklahoma Sports Betting. My name is Lisa Johnson. I'm the conference manager for the Indian Gaming Trade Show and Convention. I'd like to share a few housekeeping tips before we get started. Everyone is muted by default except for our speakers. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question or chat box and they will be brought up at the end. This session will also be recorded and available on our website. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Victor Rocha, Conference Chairman of the National Indian Gaming Association.
Thank you, Lisa. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Victor Rocha. I'm the Conference Chairman for the National Gaming Association. My co-host is Jason Giles. We have a very special guest today, is our dear friend, Matthew Morgan, who's the Chairman of the Oklahoma Indian Gaming Association. Matthew, good morning. How are you doing, my friend?
Good, Chairman. How are you?
You know what? I'm good, man. You know, it's a beautiful day in California, not to rub it in with anyone across the country, but, you know, it's a good day to be Indian, especially in California, you know, we're doing good, man. So, you know, let's just jump right in here real quick. What's happening with Oklahomans? What's happening with sports betting in Oklahoma, man? You guys, the legislation, I believe, or the session is going to be ending pretty soon. There was an article out yesterday talking about how there's a bill in the House, but time seems to be running out. Can you give us a little more information about this bill?
Sure. So there was a House bill filed by Representative Kim Trail this year on sports betting. There's always a few. That bill passed through two committees, made it to the, but on the second committee, we have something in Oklahoma where you can pass, but they pull the title off. That ensures the bill will come back to the House board. So it can continue to move, but would have to come back after the second committee hearing. We had last Thursday a deadline of all bills had to be out of their House of origin as a general rule. And that bill, while it was on the agenda, was not taken up. So effectively, I would say that Representative Trail's sports betting bill is dead. I say that with one caveat. Nothing in Oklahoma is truly dead until the sine die. We have I guess, prerogative of leadership. Every year they file what is known as shell bills. They're filed in different titles of law, and leadership has the ability to insert language into those bills at any point during the session and get those moving. And so, but the formal bill by Kim Trail, representative, good friend of ours, appears to be dead at the moment.
Well, you know, it seemed like it was doing pretty well. There was a lot of conversation about it. There was a lot of, you know, smoke. There's a lot of fire there. You know what I mean? And I thought maybe a lot of people were thinking that maybe it could move through. You know, what were the politics behind all this?
Well, I think, you know, Victor, we had lots of conversations with the Oklahoma Gaming Association about sports betting, about this bill in particular. And at least our organization, we only move by unanimous consent. Otherwise, we just facilitate conversations and try to encourage our members to reach out on individual bills of this nature. There was not unanimous consent on this bill among our membership, at least. We had groups that liked it. And again, the bill itself would have enabled bricks and mortar or retail sports betting only. And the way it was written would have been a pool betting system where the state and the tribe would share 10% of any fees collected. But we did have a handful of tribes that like that. We had a lot of people that are still interested in sports betting, but didn't like the way the fee was split up. Understanding a lot of the time, expense, risk, all going to the tribes, and just having them, you know, only being able to max out at 10% of the cost was not something that they felt like was worth their while. We had other tribes that really wanted to talk about a mobile component, especially looking across the country at the popularity of mobile sports betting. You know, and some of those things, I think Representative Latrell had some discussion with folks. He was pretty staunch on the idea that it needed to be bricks and mortars only, not mobile. I know he was in the process of changing around some of the fee structure. But you know, and that all took place within the House structure itself. in Oklahoma, at least, I think the bigger question would always be what would be the appetite of the Senate. And in this case, I don't think we know, but historically, the Senate has been more difficult on gaming related matters to get things through. That's been the harder chamber of our legislature to get agreement upon. The House has been a little bit easier to work with in the past on travel initiatives, especially gaming initiatives. So that's still a question mark there. But like I said, while that bill was not agreed upon, I think it did give a lot of tribes and tribal leaders in Oklahoma the ability to really start having a conversation, not only internally, but among tribes generally, and also with our counterparts at the state legislature.
It was a really interesting process to watch. I think the Oklahoma legislature and the way bills move is completely alien to me, but I'm still learning. Jason, what do we think about this?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a learning opportunity for myself as well as a lot of folks online, and maybe some important lessons in here. Matt, I'm curious to know, so how does this fit in though with the previous standoff with Governor Stitt and what he was looking for under new compacts? How is this all playing out together there? I mean, even let's just say best case scenario, if it comes back and passes, it's my understanding the Oklahoma legislature is in session until end of May. I mean, would Stitt even sign it?
Jason, we don't know. I mean, he's come out a couple of times, really unprompted, either joining local sports radio shows or just off the cuff conversations, and talks about how he's supportive for sports betting. Beyond what that means, we don't know, to be quite honest with you. The relationship between tribes and the governor's office here has not improved. I mean, just to be blunt about it, has not improved. It is an election year as well. The governor's position is on the ballot. I think that complicates and adds to that discussion as additionally. But saying election time, all 101 of our House members are also up for election in Oklahoma, and half of our Senate is up for election. So it's a pretty big time of year here in Oklahoma during election season. So I think that all adds into the conversation. But where the governor stands on this issue, I don't know. As we saw a couple of years ago during our gaming compact, I'll be nice and say discussions, which tribes' points were ultimately accepted and endorsed by a federal court here, that it automatically renewed. His idea of what those compacts should look like were diametrically opposed to what the reality is in Oklahoma. Is that where he stands in sports betting? I don't know. But I know what tribes we can live with economically. And we are not a California, we are not a Florida, we're not in New York. We have a state population of almost 4 million people. We have 39 tribes, 35 of which participate in gaming. We have over 130 plus gaming facilities within the state, and we compete hard with regionally with Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, Texas, New Mexico, and Colorado. I mean, that all adds into that conversation of what makes sense here may not make sense anywhere else. And so, I think, and I continue to believe we have good relationships at the legislative level. They understand what we're up against from a competitive gaming perspective. And I think they want to see something, again, as we've talked about before, and I know you guys have talked about in previous discussions, anybody that wants to participate in sports betting does. They do. There's outlets out there. And that illegal market is something you also have to bring into that conversation. So what does that all look like? I know I've went on the record and been supported by our board. We're interested in sports betting, but it has to make sense. It has to make economic sense for all of us. And, if and when the governor's ready to have that conversation, I think tribal leaders will be at the table. But it has to be serious conversations. It has to be respectful conversation, and it has to make economic sense. And if the governor's not there, then I don't know when and if those relationship ties will ever be repaired.
Yeah, and it seems that with the governor up for re-election, it kind of really changes the landscape and stuff like that. And seeing the support that you guys have had across the board has been very reassuring. Notwithstanding losing the attorney general during the middle of all this process and getting a new one, I find the politics of Oklahoma absolutely fascinating. And this is coming from somebody from California, where it's like bizarro world over here too. So, Jason, it's like, especially with all this pressure from the outside, you're seeing a lot of minds softening up with sports betting. If you look at Minnesota, a lot of it has to do, and a lot of they're talking about is the pressure that's on their borders, and there's sports betting in Iowa, there's sports betting all around them now in Wisconsin and stuff like that. So you're starting to see that mentality of no sports betting, no gambling softening up, especially when they see the tax revenue that's generated. And I think New Jersey has really whet the appetite for a lot of politicians. And as you know, Matt, one of the most important sayings in gaming, I believe, in selling gaming, is the fact that you can raise revenue without raising taxes, and that always seems to be a real sweetener. So, Matt, what do you think is going to play? I mean, it's hard to speculate, but with the elections and with the support and with the governor, I know it wouldn't be smart to go straight up after the governor, like Will Smith or something like that. But how do you think this is going to play out? How do you feel this is going to play out? I'm talking about Will Smith, not Oklahoma. I'm talking about Will Smith. So, no, go ahead.
I think from a tribal perspective, and you see this a lot, you guys know this, and in what we do, we feel like we have time. Yes, there are regional stressors to this as states around you, as they expand, but Oklahoma's never been a first mover in the game. Just it never has. As much as we encourage them, just last week we come out with a new economic impact study looking at Oklahoma tribes and how big of an impact not only economics but job wise that have in Oklahoma, and what good partners we've been. But we've never been able to convince Oklahoma to be first movers in anything on the gaming industry. So I think Oklahoma tribal leaders are prepared to wait until something makes sense. But at the same time, you need to have partners on the other side of that table that you can really communicate with. Does those faces change in the next election? I don't know. We'll wait to see, who's on the other side of the table. If something that doesn't materialize this session, I assume that we'll pick up this conversation in the fall, and it'll continue to move into the next session as well. But I don't think tribal leaders are going to be going out there wanting a deal in such a way that's against their own economic interests. That just doesn't make sense to me.
Matt, you bring up something so important, and that really is one of the big issues that the tribes use, and that the tribes have to their advantage, is time. Which is they don't need to rush. They can wait. If it doesn't go in their favors, then you just let it play out. You know what I mean? And that's how you see it happening in California. That's how you see it happening in other states. Is they term out, and I think that's one of the advantages about being Native American, is that time is definitely on our side in a lot of these things. I'm really kind of amazed, though, that the way that the political landscape is, first of all, we've talked about Stitt and his opposition to almost everything tribal. Yet you guys, like you said, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, you put out this economic impact report, and it was really amazing. You guys got a lot of press. Your numbers were very impressive in the fact that you guys put this out. What kind of response did you get for that?
Oh, I think, as always, that even though we've been here before statehood, and we've done a better job, I think, of not only our story being told, but really something that's important, I think, is that we're telling the story now. We have other people and our allies helping us, but we've stepped up more over the last several years to start telling our own story, to make sure people know how tribes are involved. And, those economic impact study, I think, just reinforces those anecdotal stories that we're able to tell, whether we're talking about education, healthcare, jobs, infrastructure, charitable giving. Everywhere tribes are visible within the state, we keep hearing the same thing over and over, is that, but for the tribes, where would Oklahoma be? And I think that's really true. But when we have, those objective numbers coming in that can show you in black and white our growth year over year and how we're involved in that conversation, I think only goes and reinforces that with more people. Most of our folks, when we started this a couple of years ago, the storytelling effort, they would hear about us, maybe, when I say us, our tribals folks in their jurisdictions, building a bridge, but wasn't for sure, or, hey, how did those backpacks at the local school get filled with all those school supplies? How did that local booster club, get those new uniforms? How did we, continue not to lose populations in the rural part of Oklahoma? When we're stagnated in the energy sector, and you're able now to point them back to saying, look at these tribes that are located in this area, look at the jobs they bring in. They're dealing with local partners. They're the ones working with their county commissioners or the state Department of Transportation to build the roads. All those things make sense to them. And I think that further emphasizes the issue that we have had has been with the governor of the state of Oklahoma. We continue to have great partnerships with state level agencies, with the elected leadership of the legislature, with our local communities, with our local leadership. They see how tribes are involved there. And so, that complexity, I know sometimes when you're right in the middle of it, it's hard to see, but when you can step back and see these stories, when you see the local chamber president come on, or the local university come on a commercial, or, your state elected rep come on and talks about how he works with tribes and tribal leaders to make sure these partnerships come along. I mean, broadband has become so important over the last couple of years. I know I'm jumping off gaming a little bit here, but the leaders in broadband in Oklahoma are tribes. They're the ones stepping out there and providing that infrastructure, providing that money, working with local communities to make sure, those kids, when the schools weren't open, still had access to broadband so they can continue to receive education. They were the ones working to make sure that meals got out to kids, all kids, not just Native kids, all kids, make sure that they were fed, make sure they didn't go hungry, make sure they had access to internet to get their homework done. All those little stories make sense. And, that's why I really appreciate about that economic report, just seeing that jump up year over year where we're at. And again, like I say, I don't think there's any better storytellers than us. I'm a big proponent of not only telling the story, but being your storytellers. Allies always help, but us controlling that narrative of what we're doing is so important. And for so long, we hadn't had that ability, and that's something that's been recent. And I'm a big fan of.
Yeah, it's really been mind-boggling to watch the governor sit and his aggressive action towards the tribes, because it just doesn't make any sense with how great partners the tribes have been with the state of Oklahoma. And again and again and again, as somebody who goes to the Oklahoma Indian Gaming Association conference pretty much every year, you see the support in the community, you see what you guys have done, and yet you have this man who wants to put politics before prosperity, really. So I think all of us in the industry are really kind of gobsmacked at his aggressive attitude towards his partners, the Oklahoma partners. So go ahead, Jason, you're going to say something.
So Matt, right now, just on a general standpoint, how are the tribes looking with an eye towards the near future here? How are they going to look to integrate sports betting given the uncertain timeline on it? You'll have it eventually. Hopefully you won't have to wait out another STIT term, but you mentioned infrastructure. All this money is going to be coming, tribal governments way and state governments for the infrastructure package, and hiring is still an issue right now. And but you have a low unemployment rate and incredible job mobility, as 4 million people just up and left their jobs in February, looking for better, because so much is out there right now. And it just seems like right now is the best time to expand. I know there's inflation pressures and supply chain issues, but how are the tribal casinos, even if you just look at Chickasaw, are you guys, is it a flip the switch thing? Do you need to build out, or do you need to just, put the online component in and let it run? What's the thinking here amongst, some of the tribes?
I would tell you in Oklahoma, our tribes probably run the gamut. We have groups that are very sophisticated, very forward-looking, and continually look at new opportunities and how they would integrate new technologies in. And that goes with sports betting, easily looking at whether that's a brick and mortar operation or whether you would have a chance to mobile, looking for, your platform partners, looking for what you would have to build out internal within your own team setting to not only grabbing that talent, but what the cost would be added to that. But we also, at the other end of that game, had a lot of smaller tribal operations that are very localized market. And they would tell you, I think that, the upside of sports betting is not there for us. We don't have a large population. We're very locally on that. Now, if we had the opportunity to enter into sports betting with some low overhead costs, with less risk, I'm sure several of them would take that up. And then we have all those in between that are looking, they're interested, they're still educating themselves. But I know this about our tribes. We have shown time and time again over the years that when we're committed to doing something, we step up to the plate and we take on our responsibilities. And I would use, the gaming compact as an example. We had a very short time to get that started. The state, when we did it, they looked at projections of what gaming would mean. Just a reminder, $70 million is what they thought. $70 million a year is what they thought it would bring in. Within a year and a half, we surpassed that. We were confident we could get there. It took a little bit to ramp up, but a year and a half, last year was like 167 million in exclusivity fees. And over the lifetime of our gaming compact, we're fast approaching the $2 billion mark that we give to the state through exclusivity fees, which 88% goes to state education. So, I have no doubt that if and when presented with the right opportunity, tribes will be ready to take advantage of it. And I think we have a great network here in Oklahoma as well that, while we are competitors, that does not mean you don't see tribes reaching out and lending helping hands to other tribes as well, because we're all good at something. And when we need help in those areas where we may not be as good as our partners down the road, they're always willing to have a conversation, tell you what they went through, point you in the right direction, because we all want to get better, because that just helps our industry as a whole. And because 60% of our visitors to our casinos are not even Oklahomans; they're from out of state. We're having to talk those people into coming seeing us. And a bigger and better product only entices more of those folks to come across and visit us. And while they're here, there's no telling what they may get into, whether it's the cultural side, whether it's museums, whether that's going up the road to one of our urban areas or metro areas. But I think it helps everybody out. So we're all moving at different paces, but we continue to have the conversation, and I really do. I really see interest from folks on what would this lend us? How do we look at that and add it to our operations? I think we're realistic. We know that sports betting is not going to be the next panacea. It's not going to be like machine gaming, but it's an amenity I think a lot of tribes look at and know how they can work that into their operation and sell that to their customers in a way that makes sense to them in their market.
Matt, how can the gaming industry help Oklahoma Indian Gaming Association? How can the industry step up and help you and be of service and be your partner? The industry is really good that way. A lot of guys, there's a lot of revenue, there's a lot of knowledge. And so how can the industry help?
I think just being an example of what they're doing already. Again, we don't look to recreate the wheel. We're looking around different markets and seeing what people are already doing, whether that's in a commercial space, but more than likely that's in the tribal space. Those of them that already have sports betting, or those that are offering, new types of technology out there. And what does that look like? How do people with integrated resorts work this in, from a marketing perspective, from an operational perspective, from a regulatory perspective? What does that look like? Indian country has always been so good about, coming together and lending support. I don't think it's a lot different than, when we developed Tito, ticket in, ticket out. and you saw, in a pocket, and then it grew across the country, and you didn't have to recreate the wheels. In 2018, Oklahoma authorized through a gaming compact supplement what we call ball and dice, which was really just roulette and craps. We're able to add those games. But we didn't have to go out and recreate rules. We just looked at our partners across the country and Indian country and said, who has this? Can you share with us your policies, procedures? Can you share with us, what your regulatory structure is? And then we worked together to make it fit what we had. But I mean, that's the really good thing about Indian country. There's always somebody out there willing to help and advance that. The other thing I would say is that, for better or for worse, the most John Q public, when they see the word Indian, they loop us all in together. They don't know if it's Chickasaw or Pechanga or Muskogee Creek. They just know Indian. And so the better that we do as a whole, we have to accept what comes from that with that perspective. So when Indian country does better, no matter which tribe it is, what industry you're talking about, I think we all benefit from that.
Well, I promised I wouldn't make any sooner jokes, because everything seems to be taken in a little later, but I'm not going to go there. Jason, I promised Matt this would be a short one. I think it's important. What I wanted to do is talk about Oklahoma and let everybody know that, we might have to wait another year. But yeah, go ahead.
At the federal level, Matt, there is some positive movement. There is talk of repealing, most people didn't even know this, there's a 0.25% federal excise tax on all sports bets, but also that 0.25% also applies to, pull tabs and some other just random games. Really, I think it's more of a legacy thing that the feds had on the books, but they're collecting that revenue. Now it's hard to this bill is definitely going to score, and it's going to be some loss of revenue to the United States. But I think there's enough support from congressmen and senators from all these various states that, this should not be double taxed. And that argument in and of itself is kind of funny, because tribes and tribal governments put up with double taxation really since their, existence. So there's movement on that. I think that's positive. And again, it just, points to now is sort of the time one of the better times to be moving on this. The slots threshold too, Matt, is that bill's introduced. It's getting great bipartisan support. It's just, bills do not pass individually anymore. Throw out whatever you learned in the 70s on School of Rock and all that. It has to have a vehicle, and unfortunately, there's not much left in an election year other than the Defense Authorization Act. But there's got to be a way, because again, these things are non-controversial, and whether you can get them on unanimous consent and voice vote, that's probably the best play. But there is some movement on the federal level. Unfortunately, we're just not getting any clarity for whatever the FBI and Treasury, whatever their hangups may be about online sports betting, and then of course down the road, payment systems. Like at some point, are you going to be able to use Bitcoin to put in sports bets and things of that nature? All that is so up in the air, and I know you guys are dealing with it on the ground. But there is positive news out there regarding the direction of the country on a national level and moving towards adopting some type of, making it at least easier for tribes and states to implement legalized sports betting. And then they can do it however they want to take care of it within their own borders. So there is some positive news on that level. But to help our Oklahoma tribes individually, we're going to be at our trade show April 19th to the 22nd there in Anaheim, and we have numerous sports betting panels. Well, now on top of all that, the Interior just today released a schedule where they're going to talk about new regulations for compacting, gaming compacts, and also taking land into trust, which of course can relate to, if a tribe wants to put a casino on newly acquired land into trust. But those issues are going to be playing out here over the next 2 years of the Biden administration. And again, we have some favorable folks. We know who they are in the federal government at key positions. And if you're a tribe that needs land into trust, we're going to have to get that done here soon. And I don't know what, this compacting stuff is. I'm glad they're taking a look at it, and hopefully their intentions are good. Most of the time when the federal government looks at the compacting under IGRA, they want to make it even harder for tribes to cut a deal. But, look at the standoff you find yourself in, Matt, with Governor Stitt, and I don't know what his reelection chances are. Did he already have a primary? Has he had a Republican primary yet?
No, public
Okay.
primaries coming in June.
Okay. So, maybe he survives that, but to think you'd have another 4 years of a standoff, just, two sides staring at each other while all this movement is going on around the country, and you guys should, and the state itself should be raking in more tax money. It just seems like a crazy situation, even a little bit more crazy than California's, but
Ouch.
yeah. So, but at least oil prices are high right now. I know that helps Oklahoma, and probably Stitt might recalibrate his thinking, because I know that, when gas was $50 a barrel and looked like it was never going to come back, now they might probably have a little more flexibility with, how well some of the oil companies are going to be doing here over the next couple of months.
Yeah, Jason.
But how does that all play out? Yeah, go ahead.
No, I just, on your federal front, I would say, yeah, we authorized to lend our name to the slot threshold discussion yesterday. We're supportive of that, of course. Excise tax, anything we can do there. I love that the National Gaming Association continues to be a leader in that discussion on sports betting, and that tribes are not at a disadvantage to commercial operations, that we continue to look at those complexities as it goes through, its many iterations. Because that is, a product of our history, and where they removed a lot of us too, doesn't lend itself sometimes to being the best markets that we once, had domain over. But, from an individual Oklahoman, and I do see a lot of Oklahomans over here on the attendee list, I would say this. One, it's very important that we register to vote. Can't emphasize that enough, especially this year. Have to register to vote. I would say for those of the people in Oklahoma that are open to that, tomorrow is the deadline to change your party affiliation. In Oklahoma, a lot of our elections are determined in the primary. That's just the way it is. If you're thinking about that, tomorrow's your deadline to get that done. But we do have those primaries coming up in June, of course, the general in November, and we have, lots of elections on order. And unfortunately, those people in those seats affect our tribes and our industry and our policies, because they need to be on the other side of that table having discussions in a way that are helpful for everyone. And whether that's at Washington, D.C. at a federal level, whether that's, California, Oklahoma helping each other, or whether it's just Oklahoma primary issue that we need to really, lock arms and make sure that we're heard in a way that makes sense. I don't think I can emphasize the importance enough, every year of voting, but especially this year. Jason, to your point, there's an opportunity cost when things don't get done in a way that makes sense. And I hope that, Oklahoma tribes are not going to pay that price because of some of those folks that sit in there. We've had our gaming compact in place now through one term. It's renewed for an additional 15-year term. That stuff should be off the table.
Okay.
That's known. That should be all off the table. What we should be talking about now is how do we add to those? What forms of gaming do we add to those, and what makes economic sense, in terms of exclusivity fees paid to the state. I don't know what it is in California, Jason. I don't know what it is where you live, but in Oklahoma, I don't think sports betting is controversial with our citizens. All Oklahoma citizens. You look on the internet, you look on your newspaper, you look at your local sports shows, you see odds, you see all that information going back and forth. This shouldn't be that hard to get through, but it is, and it is an election year. And so, the one way that I think every individual can help that conversation along, though, is registering to vote, and then not only registering, but then get to the ballot box, make sure your voices are heard in that matter. Because, in a lot of our elections, Indian country can sway those votes. But we do need to show up at the ballot box.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know,
to your
yeah,
point,
go ahead.
Matt,
Go ahead, Jason.
again, I keep pointing people to state of Virginia and how instructive that is. They just threw sports betting open online only, and they have these apps. And I mean, they're making, it's basically all gravy now. I mean, it's very low overhead costs for the state, and they're just reaping in sports betting, whatever they tax it at. And the same can be said for marijuana sales. You know, those two things were taboo 5 years ago, and now like there's just no more controversy around it. But yet at the federal level, there's no clarification in terms of, you know, whether, you know, can I take a bet across state? What if two states enter into agreement to, you know, reciprocation? You know, that's where this is really going to, at some point when it becomes more like the national lottery structure with the Powerball and things of that nature, that's where the money is really going to start to roll in. And then also this country hasn't even tapped what is, which factually is the biggest part of sports betting, in-game betting in the rest of the world. The rest of the world, they've moved on from betting games and betting who's going to win the Super Bowl 6 months from now. It's all in-game betting. And, you know, I had folks from Canby here last week showing me their in-game betting platform. And, you know, just to imagine if you're sitting at home and you can literally bet on your favorite football team's drive all the way down the field, each play making a bet. You know, I don't know, you know, the gambling addiction folks, that probably sounds like a nightmare to them, but you know, it's more about entertainment, and you've got a group of people, and you've seen the way it plays out in Europe on some of these games, even on something like tennis. Tennis is the most widely bet sport in the world, which is hard to wrap your mind around. But you know, you get a set, you get a service, all those things. It lends itself to in-game betting, as does football, because you get those pauses and breaks between plays. That is going to be, you know, people talking about, you know, California, holy grail of this and that sports betting. Just getting up and running is not the holy grail. There's so much more down the line once you really have a sports book that can integrate and handle the volume of what an in-game betting does for your operation. And you could talk to any of these guys. That's the ultimate goal. You know, Victor, when we were in London, William Hill took us on a background tour, and it was just guys at monitors monitoring in-game bets, because, you know, there's a lot of controls there, but it's just crazy to think how much more there is to do in terms of money making for sports betting, aside from just getting up your brick and mortar running, or just like in Virginia where they just said all online. You know, this is coming, and to your point, Matt, we're going to make that a little more emphasis in the Congress here, because it's just not controversial anymore. You know, there's maybe, I can only think of one person in the House who's really anti-marijuana still, and maybe one or two people in the Senate that are, you know, against online sports wagering, but that's about it. And nobody really takes them seriously in their opposition, because they have no other support. So, you know, I'm hoping we can move this forward, move the discussion forward at Anaheim, and I hope everyone will join us out there, which should be a great time to reconvene. But, you know, the sky's a limit on this. And I really just feel like with that infrastructure bill, you got to start planning to have the broadband width to handle all this.
Yeah, you know, it's for me, it just feels that it's time. You can see the progress that's happened. At first it was glacially, now it's rapidly. You know, yesterday in Alabama, they were on track, and now they're saying it's not going to move. In Kansas, it's moving. In Georgia, so all these really conservative states are starting to move on sports betting, and I think there's a template here for Oklahoma, maybe the next session. You know, that it's just happening so much. Like you said, you see it on TV, you see it in your newspapers, you're just surrounded by it. So it's just a matter of time. I think the important thing, and Matt kind of talked about it, is that making sure that this low margin industry, even though there is a lot of money, is still the tribes don't give away a lot for a little. You know what I mean? What are you getting in return? And that's always been my big concern. And like you said, Jason, we will be talking about this. We talk about other issues I feel that are important, like about IGRA and its relevancy in the 21st century, which has to do a lot to do with federal iGaming or having a bill about iGaming. So, you know, I hope everyone's going to come. Matt, I don't think I want to take any more of your time. I really appreciate you coming and clarifying a lot of these issues. Seems like you have a long way to go, but I think you guys have a lot of outside pressure that is just building and building and building. I think it's just a matter of time before the governor has to come to the table. It's a real drag that he's been so aggressive and so just negative about the whole thing, you know, and about the relationship with the tribes. I think we're all shocked. But, you know, new election cycles, some people always seem to change their attitudes. So we'll see how that goes. Again, we hope everyone attends the National Game Association in about 3 weeks. And then after that, we will see you in Oklahoma for the Oklahoma Indian Gaming Association. Are you guys planning for your show? You guys should be right in the middle of planning, right? That'll be
what are
creeping
your
up on you
dates,
real
Matt?
quick.
Yeah. Well, we'll be in Tulsa, August the 9th through the 11th. Would welcome everybody to come and join us. And if I got those dates wrong, I know Sheila will kick me later, but I believe that August 9th through the 11th this year in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
It's always a great show. It's always a phenomenal show. Everyone, you know, it's even more condensed than NIGA. You get access to more tribal leaders and more access. And so, and more importantly, you get that wonderful Oklahoma hospitality, you know, and Tulsa's a nice town too. So, well, Matt, thank you. Hey, Jason, I can't see because I'm on my phone. Do we have any questions? Am I
No,
missing
we do
anything?
not. I just checked the chat room and nothing. So, you know, saving
Right.
it all for our show in Anaheim. So,
Okay.
you know, NIGC will be there. We're working like heck to get the federal guys there, especially in lieu of, you know, we've already got our invites into Brian Newland, who signed the letter today that went out to tribal leaders. So, you know, it's tailor-made for them to come out and talk to folks and meet and greet. This is the first large tribal conference, you know, over 5,000 people, you know, in 2 years. So, you know, I know we had stuff last summer, but those were sort of off the cuff with NCAID. You know, hopefully we're back to some sort of normal. I know that, you know, Europe's has a little bit of a bump right now in the COVID cases, but, you know, hey, if everyone in America's moved on, fine. No more COVID. We'll just say it doesn't exist, but I'm going to get my 4th shot before I come out there. So you better.
Well,
believe
and by the way, California, masks aren't mandatory, so you don't have to wear them. And if you're vaccinated, you know, so California feels like it's back to normal again. It's really quite amazing.
Yep.
You know, when I'm in large crowds, I will wear my masks. I carry one in my pocket, but I don't seem to be using it as much. It's just, I think everybody was you just want to get back to normality, man. You know, after 2 years of masks and shots and all that stuff. So, Matt, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We'll see you in California in about 3 weeks. And then everyone will be in Oklahoma. I'd like to thank everybody for attending. Jason, thank you so much. Lisa, thank you. And Sheila, who's hiding in the background, thanks a lot too. So everyone, we'll see you next week, okay? Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Take care. Thank you, Matt.
He's electric.